Got old uniforms? Wreaths by Nicole P. has the solution. Nicole, a veteran, handcrafts unique wreaths from military uniforms, a perfect tribute for your loved one's service. Commemorate special moments with personalized wreaths crafted by Nicole. No uniform, no problem. Wreaths by Nicole P. has every fatigue print ready for your custom creation. Explore wreath options at www.wreathsbynicoleP.com or message Nicole directly on Facebook. Wreaths by Nicole P. Preserving memories one wreath at a time. Honor the past, celebrate the present.
Our brains tend to ruminate our thoughts and keep us there way too long. And that is when it becomes unhealthy. So we have to learn our happiness triggers. And then I talk about transcending trauma because there's so many different new methods of therapy today, like EMDR, IFS, combining that with CBT. We have to do more than just, if you're just going to talk therapy right now, then you're doing yourself a disservice.
Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast of military and veterans who refuse to be silenced. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, provide value and solutions, and to change the culture when it comes to mental health within the DoD organizations.
Hey everyone, and thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Your Story Doesn't End Here. Today, I am so excited for our guest, Reverend Dr. Christian Frazier, who is an esteemed author, speaker, and advocate for BIPOC mental health and brings expertise as a former chair of the BIPOC Committee for the Hillsborough County Zero Suicide Alliance and a member of the National Council of WellBeing. With the National Certification in Mental Health First Aid Instruction, he passionately educates and empowers individuals and communities. His impactful work featured in notable publications encompasses mental health, addiction, and recovery. As a sought-after speaker and trainer, he delivers workshops and programs to diverse audiences, including schools, businesses, and faith-based organizations. Committed to reducing mental health stigma, he is a trusted voice inspiring positive change worldwide. And also, I just want to add in, I Googled Christian right before we started talking. We were just talking about this. And you Google this man's name, and there is so much more to his bio. I actually shortened quite a bit of what he sent me. And this man did not mention that he's also an actor, that he's also a Navy veteran. And I'm sure there is so much more that I didn't see on the first page of Google. So Christian, I am so excited to have you on today to just share your story. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, share my story with you and your audience. So again, thank you.
I love it. So I'm going to pass it off to you and share away. Like I said, we're probably not going to get through everything today. We're probably gonna have to do a part 2. So yeah, but I would love to hear more about just whatever you want to share with us today, and we'll go from there.
Well, first of all, I'm extremely excited because I just released this book that I co-authored, Unleashing Potential, a guide for life mastery. The publisher searched out 20 life coaches from around the world, and I was fortunate enough to be selected as one to pick out a chapter in this book. And what I love about the book is that it's not just one perspective, it's the perspective of a variety of coaches. And some of the things that we talk about, they cross over because one of them talks about getting unstuck. And one chapter is on financial literacy. My chapter is on mindfulness. And what I did is took a deeper dive into just breathing. Georgetown University did a study that shows that mindfulness meditation can be as effective, if not more effective, when treating anxiety and depression. And a lot of people don't know that. There's been a study that was published by the New York Post that there are thousands of people who have been on medication and have been going to therapy since the early 2000s and have not gotten any better because talk therapy is really just not enough. Typically, what it does is it reinforces our trauma. by having to relive it over and over again instead of reliving it, but reframing it. We actually, mindfulness meditation, when you, and I talk about mindfulness-based cognitive coaching. And what it is it's using mindfulness and cognitive behavioral therapy to basically reframe our thoughts, to transcend our trauma, to learn how to control our happiness, but also to not be on the constant pursuit of happiness and bliss. Because to think that we're supposed to be happy all the time is unreal. We can't be joyful without sadness. It's like we have to have it. We can't, experience pleasure without knowing the lesson from pain. So I teach people to reframe their thoughts, but also how to have more resilience when the pressures of life do come, because they are going to come. But what we do is we take all of our obstacles and we see what we learn from them and transform them from stumbling blocks into stepping stones.
That's powerful. And it's so true, because I think I think a lot of people chase that happiness. And I was reading a blog that I wrote. I think it was like a private personal thing back in like 2013, when I was in a really low place in my life. And I was in a really bad relationship. And at that time, at one of the very end sentences of one of my blog posts, I was like, oh, life is just going to be this way forever, or at least the next 10 years. And this sucks. And I just wish that this, and I wish that that. And I'm like looking back at these things, and I'm like, I look back at my life at that time, and I'm like, it really wasn't that bad. But to me at that time, it felt that bad, because it felt like the world was crashing down on me. But if I didn't experience that, then I wouldn't be able to appreciate as much what I have now. And so the yin and yang, that balance, it's necessary. And so I'm so glad you brought that up. And I'm really excited about that book. Congratulations on that, by the way.
I'm so excited about it, how it's going to transform lives.
Oh, yeah.
I can use it as a tool to teach from, to mentor from. I feel like it's a guide for other life coaches. It, again, takes a deep dive into mindfulness. And in my specific chapter, I talk about 15 steps to reinventing yourself.
Mm.
And I've had to reinvent myself a lot in life because of, like I joined the Navy at 18. I graduated boot camp, I graduated from high school on Friday, and I was in boot camp on Monday.
Oh,
I
wow.
didn't even spend more than the weekend free, especially because I lived in the projects in Newark, New Jersey. It was a tough neighborhood. There's always opportunities for things to happen. And I just wanted to get up out of there, as fast as possible and to start a new life. So I went into the military under the Navy Nuclear Power Program, which is basically the second hardest school in the world, next to MIT. They take 6 years worth of college and cram it into a year and a half. So you have to kind of be like a geek and a nerd. So yes, I'm a geek and a nerd, and I have been to school for computer network and engineering, for marketing, for theology, for acting, for psychology and neuroscience. So I have literally reinvented myself. And also in real estate, I spent 20 years as a real estate agent in
Wow.
the state of Florida. I was the number 4 agent in the state of Florida and sold almost $70 million in 1 year by myself.
Wow.
So I've gone from, Navy into the technology industry, but the technology industry was a constant, like as you see right now, there's a lot of layoffs in the technology industry. And I always wanted to get into real estate. So then I went into real estate and transformed and did well into real estate. But the real estate market right now is too controlled by the economy, like the interest rates. So now the interest rates are really high, and all of my friends who are working in real estate, they are having a hard time because people can't afford. And then also all the affordable housing has been bought by corporations over the last 15 years.
Mhm.
So that we're in a housing crisis, and it's not a good time to be in the real estate. So I had to transform out of real estate. And I said, I want to get into something that is, well, let me take a step back. While I was in real estate is when I started acting,
Yeah.
and so I started acting because real estate gave me the flexibility to do that. But then you see the acting industry. We during the pandemic, no one was working. There was nothing there in Hollywood. There was nothing happening. And I was like, I need to get into an industry that is recession proof. And I got into healthcare,
Mm.
and specifically behavioral healthcare. And I went from just being in healthcare to being considered an expert in the industry and being a part of the Hillsborough County Zero Suicide Alliance. I was able to work with 25 hospitals and behavioral organizations to help develop mental health awareness campaigns, suicide awareness campaigns, and also campaigns dealing with the opioid crisis in the Hillsborough County and Pinellas County areas. So I am proud of myself to be able to have reinvented myself and also to become an author as well.
So what I love, I don't even want to say the most because I don't even know your full story. There's so much to it. But what I love so far about your story is that there are so many different chapters in your story where you could have been a statistic. You talk about growing up in the projects, and I mean, how many people don't get out of that lifestyle? Also being a Black male, and even separating from the military. There's a lot of not even just minorities, but people in general who separate from the military and have a really hard time just readjusting back to some sort of idea of normal. But then it seems like everywhere in your story, every single chapter, you hit some kind of what could have been obstacle that could have stopped you. The real estate market, acting with everything that happened in COVID. Yeah, realistically, just the way you grew up in general could have been an excuse. And so I'm really curious, A, what kept you going through everything? And then B, was it easy for you to consistently reinvent yourself, or was that a challenge?
It was definitely not easy, and there was a downside to it. There was a time where I felt like I lost I lost a lot of things. Like I lost my house. We were in foreclosure. I lost the cars because of the downturn in the real estate market. It wasn't just me. I know, like, I had clients who were worth millions of dollars, and all of a sudden I heard that they were working retail at Home Depot, and a lot of people lost their fortunes and everything. And then I had my own personal struggles because I am a high IQ person, and one of the things that comes along with that is anxiety and depression. So I have lived in experience with anxiety and depression, and even had a suicide attempt about 15 years ago. So no, it was not easy, but to tell you the story about my personal, battle with mental illness and suicide is that I felt like all hope was lost. I felt like I was stuck, and I felt like I didn't have options, but it really was a lie. And what I learned is that our brain lies to us about 80% of the time, and that it also 90% of our thoughts are repetitive. So going forward, learning meditation and years later, I learned how to reframe my thoughts. I learned how to challenge my thoughts. It's like you have to be a reporter with your thoughts. Whenever your thoughts are speaking to you, you have to say, well, what evidence do you have? Because typically the thoughts that we have, the negative self-talk in our head, is something that has either been planted by our surrounding, the people that we hang around, our environment, or someone else or an external source, and then it becomes internal, and then it continues to speak to us. But we have to learn how to have more control over it. And when we have more control over it and replace it with positive affirmations, we basically rewire our brain or get like a iOS update, a program update to think differently.
Mm.
Because as humans, we are hardwired to think in fight or flight or in trauma, and we really have to fight for our happiness.
That's so powerful. And it's so incredibly true. Our self-talk matters so much. I think that there's kind of this like woo-woo idea of affirmations, and not everyone thinks that they work. And usually if someone who is in the middle of crisis is told, oh, just say positive things about, like, there's obviously more pieces to the puzzle than
That's
just
the wrong time.
saying.
That's the wrong time to say
Right.
that.
Right.
It's the
Yeah.
wrong time. No, it's you don't, and that's the thing. That's what, so one of the things that I teach in mental health first aid is to learn how to listen, first of all, non-judgmentally, and also not give advice. It's one of the worst things that we should do. We're not
Yep.
supposed to give advice.
Yep.
We listen non-judgmentally, which is hard to do because you might have a friend or you might have a stranger that's telling you something that goes against your moral code or whatever. But you have to learn how to listen non-judgmentally in that time of crisis. And yet we have to learn how to deal with people. I tell people mental health first aid is like this. If you go to a restaurant, somebody's choking, you might have 4 or 5 people who know first aid can help them, and give them the Highland maneuver. But if somebody is experiencing a mental health crisis, people tend to stay away. And what we're trying to do as the National Council of WellBeing, we've trained 3 million people in the United States in mental health first aid. Our goal is to train 1 in 4. We know 1 in 15, I'm sorry. We know that the efficacy of the program works. We have research studies that shows, and in the state of Florida, if you work for the school system, 80% of the employees in the school system have to be certified in youth mental health first aid. It's being deployed across the country, some colleges, it's being deployed in some high schools. There's youth mental health, there's teen mental health first aid, because teens will typically tell their friends about problems before they tell their parents. So we want to teach teens how to be able to identify when their friends are going through stress, to be able to teach them self-help and also get them professional help. We want to teach people how to uh, be resilient, and then also remind them of the resilience that they already have. Like, what did you do the last time you were in this situation? Now, you really have more resilience than you think that you do. And sometimes when we're in the midst of our situation, we don't think about it. So we come along and we remind, our loved ones, our friends, our families, our coworkers about the resilience that they already have built in.
I love that you call it mental health first aid, because I think that it's less of a stigmatized term. It almost connects mental health and physical health in a way where, like, yeah, if someone fell and they got a cut and they were bleeding on the floor, we would naturally want to provide them with first aid, right? Like physical first aid. But if someone is in a corner of a restaurant, like you said, and they're having a mental health crisis, or we even maybe not looking like they're having a mental health crisis, but they might look like they're not having the greatest day, most people aren't going to stop and ask them if they're okay. They're just going to continue walking the other way. So I love that, just the verbiage in general, because the words, they matter so much when it comes to just breaking the stigma.
And during the class, we teach different terminology about breaking the stigma, because we want to reduce the stigma in our communities, because we do. I'm talking to a lot of Black males that are saying, I'm just finding out that it's okay to be vulnerable and communicate, because we're not taught to be vulnerable and communicate from an early age, typically 4 or 5 years old. It's like, shut up all that crying and and straighten up. And so we're taught that as it's not masculine to be vulnerable. So a lot of men think, okay, then I'm not going to be vulnerable because that's not masculine. And a lot of men are just finding out. I've talked to 3 Black men in the last 3 months that have told me the same thing. And they're in their 30s and 40s, and they're telling me, I'm just finding out it's okay to be vulnerable. So we have a mission and a charge because it's hard to maintain relationships and have healthy relationships if we have men with mental health issues and also not feeling that it's okay to be vulnerable. But then also we have this other thing on the other side with women where we say women, when they're trying to be a strong Black woman or a strong woman, it doesn't give you the room to be vulnerable. So we have to change a lot of the terminology that we use because in order for us to survive, we have to learn how to be vulnerable with each other and how to be authentic with each other so that we can really truly help each other and not in this fake society that social media has created.
What was helpful for you when you were going through your crises, the several times in life that you said that you've struggled, or even maybe today have those moments where you struggle with anxiety, depression, and you mentioned a suicide attempt at one point. So what brought you up from that?
What really helped me through it all is my faith in God. And it's weird because I'm kind of like a science nerd. And typically, people who believe in science don't believe in faith. But what I have learned is science and faith do not oppose each other. They're really more like twins, and they really complement each other. Modern science is actually starting to find out. Like there was an article that I saw about a year ago from Psychology Today, and it says, you know what? The church was right. If you actually, in your mind, act like it's already done, there's a part of your mind, the rectangular activated system, it actually starts to do whatever it can to make that manifestation come true. My personal story is I remember when I have been helping my family out since I was 18 years old. And it got to a point where helping others caused financial burden on me. So I had my credit wasn't bad. I went to go buy a car and I went to the car dealership and the car salesman came back. He says, man, the only way you're going to be able to get a car today is if you win the lottery. I was like, oh, man, that hurt. I was like, wow. I was like, but I didn't let that stop me. There was something on the inside. It was like, all right, you say that now, but watch, I'm going to come by here and drive back in a brand new car and you're going to regret not getting me a car. So fast forward 18 months later, I was doing really well in real estate. I was top, realtor. I was, I mean, in the state. I sold $68 million in real estate. I bought my wife a car for her birthday. I bought myself a brand new Mercedes CLS 550. And we had 5 or 6 cars. We had a Ford Expedition. We had a Chrysler 300. And so I went from not being able to get a car unless I win a lottery to having 6 cars, living in a $500,000 house on a pond with a swimming pool.
Did you go back to the dealership?
I sure did.
Same guy working.
What did you say? That was a
Oh,
Ford dealership. I got a Mercedes, which is a
right,
little bit of an upgrade.
right.
But it's not really about the material things. But what I did, and let me tell you what I did. In between there, what I did is I created a vision board, visualization, and I talk about this in the book, how important visualization is. It's not just something that, vision board, there's a science behind it that actually works in your brain when you see this every day. So I had the car that I wanted on my my vision board, my poster board, I also had it on the screensaver of my phone. Every time I answered the phone, I saw the card that I wanted.
Mm.
It was there all the time. So within 18 months, everything on my vision board came to pass. The car that I wanted, the amount of money that I wanted to make, the house that I wanted, the trips that I wanted to go on, everything came to pass because I focused on it and I saw it every day.
But you
And I
worked
was
for it
determined
too,
to make
right?
it. And that's the
Right.
thing. You just can't have a vision and a goal and not work on it.
Right.
It's like this is one of the wisest things I've heard in the last year. It's like we have to learn how to think from the finish line. Every successful person in life, Bill Gates, all of these billion, they saw the vision from the finish line, but not just there. See, this is where a lot of people stop. They see the vision, but they don't see the process, the roadmap. You have to see the vision and you have to see the roadmap to get there. And you got to focus on the roadmap. And the roadmap is the work, it's the preparation, it's the things that you have to do in order to get to the finish line. But see, if you focus on the finish line in your thoughts, what's happening right now doesn't matter as much
Mm.
because you know that this is not going to be where you're going to stay.
So powerful. And for those that are listening to this episode that are going through something, I want you to really, really pay attention to this episode. Take notes on this episode because these golden nuggets that you're hearing Christian talk about, these are the things that are going to change your life. And really implementing these principles because they matter so much and they're so true. And man, you're really putting out some great information. I'm so appreciative. Christian, when you joined the Navy right out of high school, and a lot of people, I can't say a lot of people because there's obviously people on both sides of the spectrum, but there are people that I know who joined the Navy straight out of high school that really struggled because they didn't really have that life experience, that work experience, outside of like they went to high school and one day they were a kid and then the next day, a few years down the road, they're leading sailors in the Navy. And so I'm curious, you said why you went to the Navy to get out of your situation, but A, why didn't you decide to stay in the Navy? And B, why did you decide to go the path you went after the Navy?
Well, one of the other inspirations for me joining the Navy is because I had uncles who were in the Navy
Mm.
and I saw them traveling all around the world. And I was like, man, I want to be able to do that. So that was one of the other reasons why I wanted to join the Navy and also to be able to get out of my environment. But I tested so high on the ASVAB score, like an 89, which kind of puts you in the IQ range of 120, 130. So I didn't realize that the Navy Nuclear Power School that they put me in, again, was the second hardest school in the world next to MIT. They take 6 years worth of college and cram it into a year and a half. So as somebody who grew up in the projects and had hand-me-down books, I always was an honor roll student, but I didn't really know that I was as gifted
Mm.
as I was. And I also didn't know like having 120 plus IQ means that you can actually do anything. You can, so people always say, what is it that you cannot do? I actually hear that a lot. People say, what is it that you can't do? And a lot of times I say now, like nothing. Like I speak on panels with doctors. Um, I've been doing that for the last 10 years about, because I'm also a diabetic. So I use my experiences to help others because I feel like that's just a calling, what I've had to do. And I can't help it. It's just, so that's why I penned this book and I pinned some others. I have another book on my website called Happiness Triggers, which I am in love with because, we talk about PTSD triggers.
Mm.
We also need to learn our happiness triggers. And
Mm.
our happiness triggers can be, going to the movies, reading a book, going to the beach, hanging out with our favorite friend for lunch. But we have to learn these things that pull us up out of our ruts so that we don't stay there too long, because staying there too long is what actually causes us a lot of damage. You know, it's a natural emotion to get angry and upset when something happens, but our brains tend to ruminate our thoughts and keep us there way too long. And that is when it becomes unhealthy. So we have to learn our happiness triggers. And then I talk about transcending trauma because there's so many different new methods of therapy today, like EMDR, IFS, combining that with CBT. We have to do more than just, if you're just going to talk therapy right now, then you're doing yourself a disservice, because you should be engaged in something like, if your therapist is not giving you homework, if you're not doing cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, IFS or EMDR, you should be seeking out something else, because it's not the best therapy out there to just talk about your problems. And also, I talk about this. A lot of our problems are situational. We have a lot of what I call situational depression. Change your situation, the depression goes away.
Mm.
Sometimes it's not a psychological issue. It's just that you're really still in the midst of your trauma and you can't escape it. Therefore, it's continuing to beat down on your mental health. And sometimes it takes moving away from around your family, setting boundaries with your own family. Like sometimes you have to set boundaries with your own mother and father, your own brother and sister. And it's hard to do, but it's important to do to protect our mental health.
How was your transition out of the military, and how was that in comparison to the other transitions that you experienced between careers after the military?
Transitioning from the military is always tough, because in the military, you're taught to work in units and then you get out working by yourself. You're all alone. And that is a problem that I hear a lot of military veterans talking about. You know, we're taught to work in units, and then you get out and you're by yourself. And then I remember when I got out, I got out twice. I got out and the economy was so bad. We were in a recession. I went back in.
Mm.
So I re-enlisted and I joined for another 4 years. But what happened was is that I tested so high, and I became an E5 really early on in my career, like at 19 years old. And they said it doesn't matter if you ace the test for the next 3 to 4 years, we're not going to advance you because you don't have enough time in service. So I
Mm.
was like, okay, this is my time to get out, because I'm not going to advance anymore. And I don't want to put in another 15 years to be able to move up, just a little bit. And people don't really go into the military to make money. It's just
Right.
something that you do. I feel like it was a great experience because it gave me a lot of leadership experience. I was able to be a supervisor in the telecommunications, shack, and working directly with the captains and the operations officers. So I felt like it gave me a lot of uh, executive level experience at an early age. So I'm thankful for the experience. And I'm also thankful that I was able to visit these amazing places like Cairo, Egypt, and China,
Mhm.
and the Thailand. So that was an amazing experience. But the transition from that, it was difficult, but you have to be able to pick yourself up by your bootstraps and make the transition, because I feel like that's what the military teaches us. It teaches us change, because we've had to change, moving from location to location to be deployed without notice. So I think that the military kind of prepares you for change. It's just mentally, we feel like when we get out of the military that the world's going to treat us a lot better than they do. And they used to years ago, but nowadays people don't really care about you being a veteran. It's like,
You're not
it's not a
wrong.
plus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a plus. But 20, 30 years ago, like, oh, you're a veteran, you get preference in jobs and things like that. And it still kind of exists, but It
But
doesn't
not
exist
really.
that way
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. Depends on the
Exactly.
job, I guess. I think what I hear from a lot of people is that it's losing that sense of purpose when they separate from the military. That's kind of that common theme. And you're right, the military does prepare us for the change aspect, even though it is. I mean, I remember I got out 2 years ago and it was so many changes at one time that it is overwhelming. But that loss of a sense of purpose seems to be that reoccurring theme. And it seems like for you, you've kind of always created your own sense of purpose. Did you ever feel like you attached your identity to the military at all, or were you always your own person when you were serving?
So I felt like after I got out of the military, like I was a drill sergeant for a while. Like I
Mm,
couldn't get the military out. Like I used to wake up my kids on Saturday morning. All right, get up. It's time to get up now. Make noise like
yeah.
time to wash clothes, do the dishes, time to cut the lawn. And so I was definitely kind of a drill sergeant for a little while. I had to learn how to like not be so military
Mm,
because it was definitely like program. Like I used now I know a lot of veterans that still do this. They get extremely nervous about being late to anything.
mm,
It's like start sweating and every
mm.
so I first of all I still don't like to be late, but if something prevents me from getting there on time, I'm not going to lose my mind about it. I'm not going to let it, destroy my day.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I think that it takes some time to transition your mind out of being in the military.
So how did you get from removed from this militaristic identity where you were very drill sergeanty to more of the mindset that you have now?
I think it was just a matter of going back to who I really was, being my authentic self. And I felt like being that military person. And that really is, I feel like with all of us, we all play these roles that have been programmed by where we grew up, by our parents, by schools, by going into the military and boot camp, whatever it may be, fraternities, sororities, just our environment, our social environment. So we play these roles, and sometimes we feel obligated to play these roles. Like for example, I was the class clown in school because I always finished my work early and I had nothing to do, so I just made fun of everybody. So,
That's the
so
comedian
I
part now, right?
yeah, I'm a comedian. I've
Yeah.
always been the class. People said I was going to be a comedian
Yep.
in my yearbook, and I ended up being a comedian. Like I've done stand up all over New York City, and I've worked, on Saturday Night Live behind the scenes for like 5 years. So I love comedy, but like I use comedy right now for therapy. Like I feel like comedy is, and I tell people like reality therapy. Like some of my stand up, it deals with a lot of real issues. Like I talk about stuff like erectile dysfunction, like being in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, and but I make fun of it so I can talk about an issue so that I can bring it up in people's minds, like erectile dysfunction. Like I might be dealing with that, but I bring it up in a funny way so that we can laugh about it and
So
not be
people don't feel
so,
weird. I like that.
yeah, people
Yeah.
don't feel weird about it. So, but as a comedian, I always felt an obligation to entertain people. Like I felt like people would always ask me to their parties, to their events, because I was the life of the party. They knew we were going to have a fun time. I was going to make everybody laugh, but it was exhausting. And then I had to realize that I don't have to live up to what people want me to do. And I stopped accepting invitations to like all the events. And and even when I went to events, sometimes I would just sit back, relax, and be cool because I wasn't playing a role. But again, a lot of us play all of these different roles because we're programmed or we feel societal pressures to play roles or to be a certain person. And we have to realize that we don't have to be what everybody wants us to be. You could be who you want to be, and that's it.
Mm. So many powerful things you're saying. As you're talking through your story and you're sharing all your different life experiences, I can't help but to think you've been around so many people. And I can't even just say like high level people, because there's lessons you can learn from anyone in your life. You can learn a lesson from the janitor that's cleaning the floors out of Walgreens, from the random homeless person that you walk by on the street. I'm curious, what is one of the best or something that sticks out in your mind, lessons that you've learned from the people in your journey along the way, or maybe a particular person?
Yeah, I'm going to say that I've had a couple of people on social media because I started talking about mental health on social media. I'm going to say 7, 8 years ago, like a lot. And I've had one person that said that he was going to bed with a gun and he was about to commit suicide, but he heard one of the talks and didn't do it. And actually, then he flew all the way to Atlanta to take me out to lunch to thank me.
Mhm.
And then there was another person who said, I have been walking in the fog for 12 years. But you start talking about mental health, and I went to the doctor and I started. So now, like my brain, I feel so much clearer, like my thoughts are clearer. So it's not a conversation that I know that is going to be viral on the internet because it's a conversation that a lot of people want to avoid. But I know that even if I reach one or two people, persons at a time, it's worth it.
I love that. And that's so powerful. I know I keep using this word powerful, and I can't really think of any other words to describe the feeling that your words gave me when you're speaking. But I think when I put into perspective, for me, just hearing you talk for the short amount of time that we've been conversating here, and knowing that you've been around some really high level people in the military, you've been around, actors that, have been in the field and seen a lot of people and done a lot of things, and, panels with doctors and prestigious people. And the most impactful things are the people that were impacted by your work in mental health. I think that's incredible. And it puts into perspective for us as human beings that maybe it's not always about the celebrity or about, someone's status socially. Maybe it's just about that human connection and saving people's lives, or just being there for people, which I think in turn oftentimes does save lives, because we don't even often know sometimes that we saved someone's life, because not everyone speaks up and says that. But thank you for sharing that. That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, that's been the best part is to hear people say that I started going to therapy, I started getting help, I started to really reevaluate myself. So to me, again, saving one person's life is enough.
Absolutely. Well, Christian, like I said, there's so many more things we could deep dive into, and I would absolutely love to continue this conversation. But for time's sake, we'll cut it. We'll cut it short right here for now, and then we'll leave the listeners hanging for another conversation in the future. But where can people find you? Where can they support you? And where can they grab copies of your book? I can't remember if you said it's released yet or if it's upcoming, but then also you mentioned a few other ones as well.
You can look me up on Instagram, Christian Frazier Elevate. The link to the book is right there on my profile. I'm on Facebook. I'm on TikTok. I'm on LinkedIn. And you can also look me up on my website, christianfrazier.com.
Just Google his name. It's like the whole
Yeah, you
first
Google.
page of
I
Google.
tell, yeah, I tell people just Google me.
Yeah. First one's like an IMDb link, and then I think the next one's your website, but you're definitely on there. You also do coaching with people one-on-one as well, or I think I saw life coaching somewhere on there.
So I'm an executive coach, and I work with small business owners, executives who are looking at uh, new ways of marketing, reinventing themselves, but also to motivate their employees and their teams. So I do motivational speeches. I have a partnership with an app WellBeing, and we actually offer executive coaching for businesses for like $40 per person, which is like amazing because life coaching is not, it's just not an everyday average expense. But to be able to offer it to businesses at $40 per person for them to actually have like a life coach that they can text and chat like all the time. Like, I'm having a problem dealing with my boss. Like, what should I do? And to be able to have that response, to be able to, I guess, help workplace mental health, because workplace mental health is in crisis too. There is a lot of mobbing, bullying, and all types of things going on, and we don't have the laws and protections in place to protect people at work. So Forbes is saying that workplace mental health is costing corporations $300 billion a year. So we
Wow.
want to help lower those costs by coaching people, giving them resilience and skills, but handling the whole person, physical health, mental health, nutrition, coaching, all of that, all in one app.
Yeah, when you were talking earlier about your just your journey and all the different avenues and areas of life that you've explored, and I was just thinking about how many different places you've been where mental health is a conversation that's coming up between the military, the acting world, either within the medical community. I mean, that's even become a conversation lately, is the mental health of doctors and
Nurses and doctors' mental health is high,
yes.
because they're taking care of people, but not taking care of themselves.
Yes. Yeah. That so many of these communities that are experiencing their own version of mental health crisis and not necessarily getting the tools that they need. I think the work that you do is so important because you can relate to so many different demographics of people. And there's not a lot of people walking around on this earth that can relate to a bunch of different demographics of people like that. And that's not to discount the people that have not explored several avenues, because I think if anyone listening, if you look at what you've done in life, just because you worked a certain job in, say, the military, you've built so many skills within that one job. I look at you, Christian, you being a nuke. Some people might look at that job and be like, oh, I can't translate that to the civilian world. So I guess I just have to go do something completely different. But I think of the skills that you built outside of the job specific skills, the people skills, the ability to adapt and change and communicate with people and lead. I mean, the skills that someone builds in the military that have nothing to do with the direct relation to the job, but can translate to so many other areas of life. I think that you are such an incredible example of what life can look like if we think more outside the box and think of, what am I capable of? Well, we're all capable of anything. We just have to apply ourselves and not get in our own way. And I think that for me is where I get stuck a lot, even still till this day. I just realized a few days ago, like I had the epiphany of, oh, well, I'm actually capable of being at the same level as these people that are in these rooms surrounded by people who have experienced multitudes of success. And there's really nothing that makes someone else more special than me, that I can't also achieve everything that I want to achieve too, but I often get in my own way. And so I think that you're such an incredible example of what life can look like when we just decide to pursue the things we want to pursue. So I'm so grateful that you shared just a snippet of that with us. And I hope that more people do share your journey and join you on your journey and just follow you and support you, because you're doing incredible work. Christian, the last question I'm going to ask you to wrap up this episode is if there's any last words or pieces of advice that you want to leave the listeners with today.
I really feel like a lot of us, we do get stuck. And when we do get stuck, we don't necessarily know how to get unstuck. So if you really do want to get unstuck, this book, The Unleashing Potential, it has so many different ways. My chapter alone has 15 steps to reinventing yourself. But then there's a whole different chapter on getting unstuck. And every life coach teaches about getting unstuck. So to have a variety of these different perspectives that you can take, and then you still have to make it your own. I tell people, whenever you get some information, like I tell people, I get information and I Fraserize it. I make it my own. When I learned sales and I was following other people and they were mentoring me, I took the information and I Fraserized it. So take the information, make it your own, and then develop a plan. Because when you develop a plan and you start working in your plan, you start to feel better about getting unstuck.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. With your support, we are able to increase awareness of the mental health issues affecting service members and veterans today with the goal of creating positive change. If you got value from this episode, please take 30 seconds to subscribe and share this episode within your own network. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.